Thank you. The gentleman out there, Reverend, says God has blessed him.
Yes.
And while others are crying, I'm sinking. He's saying, I have all I need.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have is taking me away from God.
Okay, I would ask one very important question of our caller. Mm-hmm. And that question is this. What are you doing with the blessing you have received from God in terms of passing the blessing on to others? Mm-hmm. I think it is very important when we are blessed by God, we in turn pass on some of the blessing. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we are blessed by God to be a blessing to others. If we consume the blessing ourselves, yeah, and especially, usually it leads to worldly things. Maybe it's alcohol, maybe we get stuck with food, and maybe we even end up in drugs or whatever else. But at the end of the day, if we consume the blessing on ourselves, it will eventually destroy us. It corrupts us. That's exactly what happens. But the best way to counter that is to take what God gives us and share some of it. Bless somebody else with what God is blessing you with. Otherwise, we become like what I call the Dead Sea principle. Mm-hmm. You see, you read about in the Old Testament the Dead Sea, where waters were flowing into the Dead Sea, but nothing was flowing out. The Dead Sea was, and still is to this very day, you can build nothing around those waters, around the shoreline. It is highly, highly, highly corrosive. Now what happens is if we have the blessing of God, I'm picking up on a principle here. If we have the blessing of God flowing into our life, and yet in turn we don't allow any of that blessing to flow out of our life and touch others and bless others, we will in fact become a corrosive individual. We will become corrupted by the blessing of God. You see, there is an account in the scripture where we read, I think once again, I think it is in the Psalms, telling the story of Israel, where Israel were asking of God, God, give us this, give us that. They were murmuring, they were complaining, and the scripture tells us that God gave them the request of their heart, the request of their soul, but at the same time, upon receiving the blessing, or what should have been a great blessing, what came was leanness. So they end up being in lack within their soul. Materially, they had plenty. God was providing. God was taking care of what they needed. But within their soul,
nothing.
They became lean. They were lacking. Lacking peace, lacking joy, lacking a sense of self-contentment or a sense of satisfaction. And so we need, when we get the blessing of God, when we have, and times are plenty, we need to take what we have and share some of it. We need to give. I think this is the thing that counters the blessing corrupting us. I think we need to be able to give. We need to be able to share something with somebody else. Otherwise, it does take us down the wrong path eventually.
Reverend, you mentioned Dead Sea. What hit into my mind was pastor association. Because if you are associating with people who are worldly, they're as good as a Dead Sea. So there's no way you're going to get any fruit out of that. What would be a word to the young man who has just called and the other young men out there who God is blessing, but they are finding themselves in a Dead Sea, no fruit coming out of their lives? What would be a word, Pastor?
Thank you very much. The first thing that I would want to say about it is it is quite clear that if you have a friend and that friend takes you somewhere where you don't like, it's either you endeavor to change him, follow your ways, or if you fail to change him, then leave him alone.
Or he will change you.
Because he may change you and drag you along.
That's true, sir. That's true, sir.
And so, the biggest thing as a Christian that you ought to do is to endeavor to change that someone to come to Christ, to join you, not you to join him.
So all we are saying that association is very important.
It is very important.
Yes, sir.
And as a Christian, you cannot do away with association.
Yes, sir.
But then it matters to know where you are going.
Yes, sir.
Am I going into the right direction or not?
Great. Yeah. You have something to say?
Yeah, so we can either influence others.
Oh, great. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Please, go ahead.
It's me again in the print Isaac.
Yes, please.
Is it right to marry a lady who was already a child from someone else?
Okay.
Yes.
Are you a Christian?
Yeah, I think that's all.
And is she a Christian?
I finished that. So lady has got what? I didn't get the. Could you pick up the second part?
Another call? The question is that is it right as a Christian? That's why I was asking you whether he was a Christian or not. They were saying, is it right to marry a woman who had a child out of wedlock?
I think.
Hello.
Hello. Good morning, sir.
Yes, how can you know that this person is for you? Like a woman, she's meant for you, she's the one for you to marry. And is it right for a man to marry a woman who's 1 year younger than him? How can you know she's the one sent from above? Yeah.
Okay. The first question was, is it right to marry a woman who had a child out of wedlock? Second question, how would you know this is the right woman to marry? And is it okay for a man to marry a woman older than him?
I think the first issue to address is, if you are a Christian, you would certainly be wanting to marry a Christian. Scripture is very clear that we need to be equally yoked spiritually. And having said that, spiritually we're all on different levels too. For example, a pastor who is serving in the ministry obviously is on a level spiritually in his faith where it demands something of him. He has to give to others as he takes from God. So if he is looking for a wife and he takes on a wife, she may be a Christian, but then she also needs to be on a level spiritually where she can connect with what her to becoming husband would be doing in the ministry. Otherwise it would be a problem.
Yes, sir.
Spiritually she wouldn't manage it. But there needs to be this being equally yoked thing. This is the number one thing. Now, what was the other question?
The other question is a woman that has a child.
Yeah. Look, I don't think God himself has a problem with two people getting married. First and foremost, they're equally yoked spiritually. Secondly, if there's a child that is already there on the scene, I don't think God has a problem with that in itself. I think we would need to look more at what the other circumstances are surrounding that, whether there are other unresolved issues, whether there are other things taking place that need to be dealt with. Not every situation is right for everybody.
Yes.
There are many other issues that come up when you look at that.
And like Pastor said earlier on, God forgives.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a God of a second
He's a God
chance.
of grace.
So
absolutely.
there's no woman who can say today, because I had a child out of wedlock, then I'm condemned for life.
Exactly.
Another question, Pastor, was that how would you know this is the lady I should marry? And is it okay or advisable for a young man to marry a lady much older than them?
First of all, I will try to answer this question. How
Yes,
would
sir.
you know that this is the right lady for me to marry? First and foremost, you, as believers, you'll be meeting at church, and you'll be able to be understanding each other's character. Remember, we're coming from character. And so, as the apostle here has already stated, you need to move at almost the same level in order for both of you to contribute towards the ministry.
Meaningfully.
Because then if there's a disparity in the two of you, then there's a likelihood that you will not prosper in the ministry.
One will
It
drag
will
the
collapse.
other.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so there is a challenge, but you can be able to understand and you know that this is the right lady for me to marry.
It speaks in the spirit to say
Precisely.
this one is the one. And the age, the issue of age, maybe as Wazungu you have a different perception.
I think. Look, we need to take a look at the two individuals concerned to start with. For example, I have 5 children. They are all adults now. Some of them much younger adults, some of them older. You would look at, from a parental point of view, looking at my children getting married, I would be looking at the maturity level for starters, and character, of course, we come back to again. Looking at the maturity level, the level of emotional maturity, spiritual maturity for the individual, looking to get married to somebody who is older. perhaps
Okay,
older.
okay. Yes, sir. Yes.
So there needs, once again, we come back to this sense of compatibility and being on a level. I don't think it's about numbers at the end of the day. Although I wouldn't recommend a 20-year-old marrying a 100-year-old. I don't think that would, you would be more the carer. You would be more the carer than the husband or the wife. So we need to be practical in these issues too. We need to think about, are we going to have children? How many children are we going to have?
So the gap can be there, but it should be reasonable.
I think we need to be sensible. I don't think we should get too carried away. But at the same time, we need to check the motivation of our heart. When we look at another individual, many times we're looking at things according to the outward appearance. Maybe we're thinking, I'm going to marry the older woman, I'm going to marry the older man, they've got plenty materially. They've got money in the bank. I think I hear God speaking to me through the money. He's saying, that is the one. When in fact, in our hearts, we have a longing for some financial security. So the bias, there's a bias there. Yeah, I'm going to marry that one, no problem. And when in fact you get married and maybe in 6 months you've got all kinds of issues you never even thought of.